invited me to take the chair and distinguished guests, friends, and members of the gathering, ladies and gentlemen. I think I needed this because after many years, I actually read a Hindi book. And I'm sorry, I'm going to speak in English. वैसे मैं हिंदी में पढ़ा लिखा हूँ, यूनिवर्सिटी में भी हिंदी पढ़ा था, लिखा भी था। एक ज़माने में धर्म के लिए भी आर्टिकल लिख सकता था और लिखा भी हूँ। लेकिन उसके बाद the original Indian languages, and I consider English to be among the later Indian languages, I don't use any of them in public discourse. That has been my linguistic retardation over the years, because I write in English, I speak in English, I don't always think in English. So my thoughts to that extent would be something that is gathered from all the languages which I have learned, which I have been educated in, and which I have picked up. So it took me a lot of time to read this book, because the language as well, subject is not very new, but the language and relating the language and the way certain concepts and principles are articulated, it was a learning experience for me. And I must thank Piyush Govele for producing this excellent work. And there were many chapters in this by which I was fascinated. But the chapter that I most liked, and for some reason I related to, is Khilafat or Ashayog Ki Aur. Now, while reading this chapter, I was, for some reason, because I read slowly and I have to digest it first, my mind was invaded by thoughts of Turkey and the elections that are still going on in Turkey. The first round is over, and Erdogan is ahead, and we'll have the second runoff election on May 28th. And it's very interesting that we had two elections, both of which are very important in their own ways, and they have a lot of commonalities, and they have, I think, a bearing on what the author has written in this book. Because I was also at the same time thinking of the elections in Karnataka. So I was thinking that how, and somehow, I don't know whether this is a tenuous connection or this is a cogent connection, whether for that reason my this thing would be coherent or not. But I connected secularism, the elections in Karnataka, the Khilafat movement, and Gandhi on communalism. And I also gathered things, went to some of the other books by R.K. Sinha, Ramachandran Guha, and picked up what Gandhi had said about both Khilafat movement and about Karnataka long before we had a state by that name. Because, and all those things happened almost exactly 100 years ago. This is the 75th year of Gandhi's assassination. This is almost the 100th year of the Khilafat and the kind of what you call the Treaty of Lausanne. And it is almost 100 years, let us say, after Gandhi's unforgettable speeches in Karnataka. That was in 1924. So I've just picked up a few of these strands, and I will take about 10 minutes, if that is okay with you. Or we would like you to make it less? Okay. So I made some notes, and this elections in Karnataka was very uplifting for all of us. Not because a particular party won, but because certain forces, thoughts and principles prevailed, and the majoritarian communist party was defeated. Just as in Karnataka now, more than 100 years ago, in the 1920s, the Khilafat movement initiated by Gandhi for supporting Turkey against the imperialist plot to break it up. It was one of those unforgettable, luminous moments of history which saw exceptional communal amity between Hindus and Muslims, with both of them coming together in India for the cause of Turkey. Therefore, it is perhaps not a coincidence that while India was watching the electoral battle in Karnataka unravel, Turkey too was in the midst of an election that could have far-reaching consequences, particularly whether the legacy of Erdogan, for there are many deficiencies in this, there are many deformities in the the political arrangements. But for all that, he remained stoutly secular. And there are many definitions of secularism too. You have secularism which is anti-religious, and you have secularism which is respect for all religions. And until Erdogan came on the scene and stabilized the political scene in Turkey, you had a succession of coups and various, and you also had secularists, but they were anti-religion. And again, there is a kind of a coalition which would have disparate elements in it. So you do not know how it would be. And it is primarily driven by the West, which aimed to kind of attain a secularization of societies and polities, which is anathema, if not alien, to many of the cultures to the east of the Mediterranean. So Erdogan's opponents seem to have underestimated him, because he came within close to 5% of the winning mark, but he was kept below the critical 50% mark and will have to Is it better now?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you. And the surprising thing is, just like there are so many people in India who claim to be Gandhians and inspired by Gandhi. In Turkey too, everybody claims to be inspired by Kemal Atatürk and calls himself a Kemalist. And most political leaders, one would say, at least the more prominent ones, including Philip Darajli, they are loyal to the, let us say, anti-imperialist and secularist legacy despite the compromises. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of our story. I want to go back a bit while on the subject of politics and communalism. It is only appropriate that we should talk a little more, a few more paragraphs. I have jotted down about Gandhi's Khilafat movement, India's support, the unified support of India's Muslims and Hindus, Turkey's resistance of the imperialist plot to split their country, and the Karnataka election, which is perhaps the most resounding electoral rejection in the past 2 decades of the toxic communalism and majoritarian politics that flourishes on pushing narrative of Hindus and Muslims being sworn enemies and destined to remain enemies. Making the connection between Karnataka and Turkey, as I am doing here, would also remind us that Gandhi, his principles, practices, and forms of public mobilization are as relevant today as they were 100 years ago or 75 years ago. And that in every situation of potential conflict or confrontation between the weak and the strong, the mighty and the oppressed, the armed and the unarmed, the state and the people, or a brutish ruling force, and an exploited, oppressed, or alienated people, there are lessons to be drawn from Gandhi's life and his politics and his practices. Particularly so when confronting communist forces, as we are today, and as the people have done in Karnataka and emerged triumphant. It was after returning from South Africa in 1950 and the Balkan War and the then colonial powers attempted to dismember Turkey after World War I that Gandhi launched his famous non-cooperation against the British government. And from what I can recall and gather from the book of R.K. Sinha, Gandhi's program of non-cooperation was adopted at the Khilafat Committee meeting in Mumbai in May 1920. And soon after this Congress, Gandhi went on an extensive tour to rally people behind the Turkish cause. I think this is perhaps an extraordinary event in Indian history and politics, that we have one of our greatest leaders and one of the world's greatest political thinkers who led a movement in one country against an imperialist force, which was not only occupying its territory, but also against its plot against another country, a distant country. This itself is an exceptional development in the history of both democracy and development. In his scholarly book, The Turkish Question, Mustafa Kemal and Mahatma Gandhi Sinha maintained that the movement to help Turkey was also a brief moment of communal amity between Hindus and Muslims in India. In a letter to the Viceroy Lord Chelmsford, Gandhi protested the British treatment of Turkey and warned him that the non-cooperation policy would intensify if it implemented the Treaty of Sevres. The Treaty of Sevres involved ceding large parts of Turkey's territory to France, the UK, Greece, and Italy, and also create large occupation zones within what was then the Ottoman Empire. At the call of Gandhi and the Indian Muslim activist Maulana Muhammad Ali Jawahar, many people protested, gave up titles and honors conferred on them, and boycotted foreign goods. Writing in 1921 June, in an edition of Young India, Gandhi appealed to Hindus to join the movement against dismemberment of Turkey. India is not ready today, he wrote, but if we would be prepared to frustrate every plot that may be hatched for the destruction of Turkey or for prolonging our subjection, we must secure an atmosphere of enlightened non-violence, not the non-violence of the weak, but the non-violence of the strong, who would disdain to kill but gladly die for the vindication of truth. According to Muhammad Naim Qureshi of the School of Oriental and African Studies, the University of London, Gandhi made it clear to the British Viceroy that he, as a Hindu, cannot remain indifferent to the cause of Muslims who are extremely hurt due to the indignity heaped on Turkey. Their sorrows must be our sorrows, wrote Gandhi. And so, when the Khilafat resolution was passed, even after that, you had people like Madan Mohan Malviya, who would today be described as a righteous leader, asked Gandhi to suspend the campaign till other members of the Congress party could sit and discuss it. But Gandhi declined. Non-cooperation has become a religious duty, and it cannot wait for the Congress decisions. In matters of conscience, the law of the majority has no place. I think we should remind ourselves of this, that in matters of conscience, the laws of the majority have no place whatsoever. So, because I've come to today, historians in India, contemporary historians, they fear that the very forces that were behind the killers of Gandhi, who had been spurned and isolated over the last 75 years and pushed to the fringe, are now being treated as a cult and mainstream in India. In recent years, attempts have been made by self-avowed Hindu nationalists. I say self-avowed because none of us Hindus consider them to be nationalists in the right sense of the term. To give respectability to Godse, by referring to him as a misunderstood patriot who till now was condemned as a traitor and a terrorist. The cult of Godse is no more marginal, but mainstream, says Ramachandaran. He feared that centuries ago, India had turned out Lord Buddha's teachings for their opposition to social inequality. Many Indians are now wishing to serve for Gandhi for his ideas of interfaith harmony because it has become politically inconvenient. I just want to recall something Gandhi said again when he had gone to Karnataka in 1924. He had said Karnataka will show the way to India. In 1924, Gandhi extended unequivocal support for the creation of a separate Karnataka province based on the Kannada language, and he nourished the fond hope that it would uphold the age-old values of communal unity and provide remedies to deal with Brahmin, non-Brahmin friction and show the way forward for India as a whole. And speaking in Bangalore on August 28, 1927, he said, "You have no Hindu-Muslim quarrels. You are unaffected by the misdoings in the north." This is a very important term for those of us. I don't say South India, I say I come from true India. So the misdoings in the north is what we are all paying the price for in the southern part of this country. So such a remarkable legacy of Karnataka, unaffected by the misdoings in the north, was flagged by Gandhi 100 years back. And tragically, with the advent of the BJP in the electoral arena of the state, the misdoings of the north were slowly introduced against the will of its own people. So, I would like to come back to this question that in 25, again, while answering a voter's question, the question posed to Gandhi was, what is the duty of the voters in the coming elections to the Legislative Council? He appealed to voters that they should only vote for those candidates who were remaining committed to the cause of Khadi, winning, prohibition, and abolition of untouchability. They resolutely stood for unity among Hindus, Muslims, Christians, Parsis, and Jews. In other words, he wanted people to vote for candidates contesting elections by taking into account the basic issue, one of it centered around communal unity and amity. It implied that he wanted voters not to exercise their franchise in favor of those who divide people on the basis of faith and polarize society by taking up religious issues. Gandhi's advice assumes critical significance in the face of the danger of majoritarianism unleashed by Hindutva forces in large parts of the country. But hearteningly enough, we have the example of Karnataka, where democracy, equality in its broadest sense, and social justice have triumphed. And these were the thoughts that passed through my mind when I was reading Mr. Piyush Bavele's book. Thank you for the conversation. Thank you all of you.